What is the perspective of like a CEO? Hello, everyone. You're tuned in to the EO Inspire podcast series. We call it Pour Out What's Special because we pour our guests their favorite drink and they pour out their passions for us. Every entrepreneur has their story to tell, and we're here to listen and learn from their experiences. Okay, so Ven, we've talked a lot about wine already, but we kind of got ahead of ourselves because I think I need to introduce you a bit first. So again, I talked about how long I've known you, but more so on your business side. So you are the CEO and president of SCPA, most known for Sanicare, I think is probably your most popular brand, but you have other consumer brands. Sure. And you've somehow been able to capture this market as a local company, going up against major conglomerates and multinational companies. Can you tell us more the story of like SCPA and when you joined as well?
Right. So our company is turning 25 next month, and I joined like right a little bit before the fifth year. So I was there pretty started. That's in many ways I consider myself more as a Gen 1.5 than a 2. But we'll get into that later. Okay. But so I joined relatively early, right after college, in fact. And my dad started this, and he's a paper guy. He did his career in Mindanao, in the biggest paper mill, and he in Asia at one point, and eventually went to Bataan for time in other categories. But he basically saw an opportunity here in the Philippines, and also it was partly caused by my mom because she was being affected by the hygiene quality of the tissue paper here in the Philippines. So my dad started one. You know, he started with 11 people, didn't expect it to grow. He didn't expect to go national. So even when I joined the company, it wasn't national yet at all. I was the guy who like, okay, let's do this. But he really created like a very high quality standard. It wasn't present at all in the Philippines. Of course, when you go to the supermarkets now, our brands, Sanicare, Tissue, Cheers, all that, they represent a quality level that's already being emulated by our competitors. So it doesn't seem like our edge now is obvious. But if you go back 25 years, like the quality was just different. And when he came out, he underpriced it by like 40% versus Kimberly-Clark. Yeah. And another company, the huge company, SCA, both international. SCA is still alive in the world, but it's actually not in the Philippines anymore. We kicked them out. But so we basically fought them here in other regions, and we went into institutions, which are like hotels. So we captured both retail and institutions. So fortunately, we've been number one in our category for the past few years, probably, And we're now getting into other categories like wet wipes, trash bags, cottons, into even chemicals. So we're really looking for the next S curve, you know, the next jump.
Yeah, and when did you join? Because you started in NCR first, because I thought that when you first came on board, you just developed all the business in the South, right? You were stationed in Davao, was it? Just to build the business there. Yeah. Was that the first step of making like the brand national, I guess?
It wasn't like a master plan, but at that time that I joined, literally we just had one plant, which is here in Taguig. It's still there, but we had a few distributors in the north, Luzon, and a few from South Luzon. But we didn't have any Visayas, Mindanao presence at all. We had, some minor distributor. In fact, that's the reason why we opened the office in Davao, because one of our customers is asking for help. He's saying, produce the items here. Don't ship it, and he's right, because the cost to ship a full container from Manila to Davao costs the same as Manila to Los Angeles, LA.
It's absolutely nuts.
It's crazy. So he was completely spot on. But we started with an office. So I went there like 2 months into joining the company. That opportunity came, and I took it like immediately because, of course, I wanted to prove myself as well. It's kind of like,
second gen
mindset, right? Yep. Like you don't want to be handed the reins. You want to be able to like earn it.
it.
Yeah. So So Davao was like the first thing. That's literally 20 years ago.
How many years is this into the business? Because you're 25
This is all turning
years
into the
old.
fifth. Yeah. So I went to Davao October as well. Next month is October. So it's like aligning with the 5th and the 20th and 25th year. So
Next month.
So yeah, so I've been working for 20 years now, basically. So 20 years and 2 months. So next month I'll be in Davao already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I might be going there anyway for our 20th. So I still have staff who have been with me since the start.
Yeah.
So it's good to see them. So we did the vow, and I was 21, and it was probably one of the most fun things I've done in my life.
That's what you always say.
Yeah, it was crazy because that was like bombings happening in Davao, crazy stuff. My dad getting flack from his friends, like, why did you send your only son to Davao? You're trying to get him killed. But people don't know. People don't know. My dad had the exact same story. He was never allowed to graduate. This was during the martial law years. He wasn't allowed to graduate because he was such a rebel. He had to flee to Mindanao to get a job.
No way.
In the exact same age, 21.
As you.
He went to, not in Davao, but it's close enough, in Surigao.
Yeah.
And eventually that's where he met my mom. But he had the same story. He understood completely what I was trying to do. Though in his case, I guess he was kind of trying to build a career away from all that political things.
Yeah.
So it was amazing symmetry. And he was saying that, I went to Davao. I went to Surigao exact same month as you. So literally, it was like 30-year difference.
Yeah, I don't think that's coincidence, man.
Yeah.
I really don't.
So it was amazing. That was the time that I think that I really came into my own. It took a while, made a lot of mistakes, but we did Davao, we did Cagayan de Oro, so we got whole Mindanao. Then I went to Iloilo, Bacolod, and then lastly we did
Cebu was last.
So Cebu was last.
Wow.
Because everybody was saying, it's such a tough nut to crack, but it's like the culture is different. But it wasn't true. I had the most fun, and I guess the most misery in Cebu, but it was like the whole Vismin was my baby, and I still feel very close to them right now. So
Yeah.
that was the story, my story. But also in some ways, it kind of mirrors the SCPA story because we never thought we would do anything outside of even Manila.
Which is an insane thought now because I get to travel to visit all of my regional distributors. You take over your own distribution,
Yeah.
right? So you don't
Yeah.
really have distributors anymore. But I can see your products everywhere. I don't know how you guys do it. Like the most random small
Yeah.
restaurant in the middle of nowhere. Somehow I'm gonna see like either your napkin dispenser.
Yeah.
Or like I'm getting soap and there it is, SCPA.
Yeah.
I mean, like, all of that was the backbone of you setting it up first in Visayas, Mindanao. I'm not just talking Metro Manila. I'm talking everywhere in the country.
Yeah.
Like, I know this isn't maybe necessarily related to the theme of this, but I'm just wondering, how are you able to saturate so many accounts in the country?
Well, but you're right. It's part of the learning, right? Like it's part of the story that we kind of stumbled on it. We got it right the first time. It's one of those things we got right the first time is that we went local. Mm-hmm. So when I went to Davao, I didn't want to come there in fact, in many ways, it's a homecoming for me. I'm from Mindanao. Mm-hmm. My mom's from Mindanao, and I understand the dialect. So we always went local. So we never wanted to be like the imperialist Manila guy coming to Davao to
They don't like that.
Wreck crap, right?
Yeah.
So you're the local. So we came local. We hired local. We literally don't. See, that's the thing with the mindset of having a distributor, right? You're not really from here. You're hiring a local to do it for you, but for us, we wanted to be there. So in Davao, we got it right. We hired locals in CDO. When we had our first plant, our own factory. So, and they know where it's at. They know where the people vacation. They know where the sari-sari stores, which stores pay well, which ones don't. And you don't have to do trial and error. And so, and it's a tremendous honor for them to be hired by a national company. That's the thing. Like if you're direct. So most people, the common thing is that you're an employee of a distributor, mm-hmm. that distributes a national brand. But very few people could say that you are directly an employee of a national company. And I think that's what we were offering to them, because we were not using any of these middlemen.
Yeah, so you localized,
Yeah.
but then how do you find, like, how did you still have to set up an infrastructure to hire those particular
Yeah.
people in each of the areas. So you just rolled up your sleeves,
Yeah.
went to all those areas, and then found those people?
We did all the hiring. Before the pandemic, my parents were like in the branches every 2 weeks. They still traveled a lot. And so this is hard for them in a way that, the excitement that they would have in meeting the people that you hired. And so that's one thing we're missing a lot right now, obviously. But I mean, the hands-on experience of like being there and hiring and firing people.
Yeah.
And I was there. I lived there. I was literally a local. I believe I came back to Manila sometime in 2009, full time.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that I gave up after. So I gave my territory up after like 7-8 years. So I was there. So. And I was doing all the stuff. I was doing the delivery. I was doing the sales calls, doing collections. So I was there. And it was fun. It was like so much fun. And it's something I'm afraid that I'll never capture again in terms of like sheer fun. But it's not really true. It's just that the fun changes, right?
It does.
But it was a very, very happy time. And I think you were asking me before, like, in all this time, why didn't you take an MBA? It's like,
yeah, Ben, because you got into Wharton and you could have gotten your MBA there,
Yeah.
and you elected not to. At that point, were you in Davao? Or at that point, you
Yeah,
probably...
it was around the time that I was thinking of coming back to Manila. So it was like perfect time, right? Okay, I'm going to come in. But, so I did my GMAT, the test, and I did very well.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible time, but I sent it to a couple of universities. I actually didn't get into the ones that were kind of considered less than...
But you got into Wharton, which is considered the best, if not one of the best, right?
If not, yeah. But then I took a look at what was really needed of me, and I talked to a few people who went to Wharton, and I have a funny story about that. But that was around the time, 2009, 2010, I was thinking of taking a 2-year break in studying. And then one of my friends saying, study what? You've been doing it for 8 years.
I mean, you'll be doing case studies. You probably have the best possible case study with the growing business that you manage, right?
Yeah, but he was like saying, he actually was pushing me to do a different program. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you're not going to do much with an MBA, because you do an MBA because of your network, right? The network you're going to meet in an MBA is completely different from this other program he's recommending, which is, I think,
the Harvard OPM.
The Harvard OPM.
Where my brother is now.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I'm very excited for him. I hope to join him next year for that. So it took 10 years, but I mean, life happens. But there's always that thing in my mind, like,
is there any regret that you didn't pursue that? Like, do you ever think about what would have happened? You go there, you get the MBA, you come back to the business. Do you think that the business still would have flourished? Was it at a point where it was ready for someone like you to step out for 2 years?
It's one of those questions you don't want to think too much on, because I wanted to. I wanted the experience, but really 2 years?
And then looking back, you probably can't regret what direction the business has taken now.
And where it is now, and I
wonder
wonder
jeopardize that.
Exactly. So normally my answer to that is like, I'm happy where I am. I'm glad that I am at this exact same situation, but there's still, I mean, I'm only 41, so I mean, I could obviously do it if I wanted to. And I think that's the amazing thing, right? Learning never stops. Like, it's not contained to a specific age.
I think that's a major misconception, especially among business people, like at that age where you can get an MBA. And if like you were very thirsty for knowledge, you would think that's the path to success. But it's really not, right? Like, thirst for knowledge, I met you. How much did you learn about wine in such a small amount of time? How much can you learn about so many other things in the world without having to like get that badge to say like I got an MBA at Wharton, right?
But that's the thing, right? Of course, you want that badge, that competitive spirit, right?
Badge is nice.
It's nice.
You can flex it. You can be like, I got.
And then you're calling all these people who are eventually also, rich business people, successful.
Yeah.
So having that network is also great. I think that's probably the one thing I probably regret the most, if there's anything. But thank God EO's here.
Yeah.
EO's like that network for me now,
Agreed.
and it's like my own MBA, and I really loved. Only been here for a year, but love it so
Just
much.
so many learning events. You can
Yeah.
learn. That rabbit hole also goes quite
Or
deep.
even just reach out to like people. Like we meet the most interesting people right
great.
now. It's great, and
It's
then
wonderful.
and they're just like you, and they have all the same emotions you're going through. And I think that's what I think EO provides in terms of like its own very own kind of MBA. Right?
I agree.
So
Everyone has like that same. Well, it's one of the core values that we're talking about, but everyone has that thirst for knowledge. I
Yeah.
think. Or,
yeah, it doesn't have to be confined to like a traditional definition of thirst for learning, right?
Yeah.
Or you have to read a lot of books or what. It's like finding out. One of the most important lessons I've learned recently, in probably the past 5 years, is learning how to learn.
Yeah.
It's just like there's actually a Coursera on that, and every employee of mine goes through learning how to learn. And it's like one of those things. I wish I learned this like back in high school. Learning how to learn and like figuring out and honoring the way you learn is very important. So a lot of people, and I know you, like you're stressed about not reading as many books as you'd like.
Actually, I think that's a great segue because Ven, I remember you told me, I think it was only last year, you just set a goal for yourself to read like 50 books in a year, and you finished it like well before the year was over.
Yeah.
So you're someone that can absorb knowledge through reading.
Yeah.
And there's also people like me who don't have the patience to get through like 10 pages without falling asleep. But I still consider myself very thirsty for knowledge.
Yeah, but you've been doing like boxing for like
I don't know if that counts.
no, you've been learning something. For me, boxing is a life skill, right? You've been learning for it
I had to fight
6
someone in
days
a
a
bar
week
fight.
for the past few weeks. I
Yeah.
think that's like its own kind of learning, right?
Well,
So-
for me, it's like I learn so much more efficiently from like watching other people talk. And that's kind of why I'm doing this podcast. Like I spend a lot of time every morning just watching interviews of people I admire.
Yeah.
And I'm able to kind of get nuggets of wisdom from those people that I admire. So that was kind of the idea behind why I wanted to do this, because in terms of like content during COVID, I was just consuming content, and I was thinking, well, what if I can contribute content that might be helpful for people to see?
For sure.
Plus, it's super fun to create content
Yeah.
at the end of it. But yeah, that's how I like learn. And
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, do you get most of your learning, because you have a huge thirst for knowledge, is it really from books for you? Is books, and like what type of books are we reading? Because you don't read all nonfiction. You can't. You read tons of fiction too, right?
No. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, wow, this is like the big topic today. And
Yeah.
first of all, like one of the things I love about learning how to learn is understanding how you learn. And number one for that is your brain can only handle certain sets of information only at a specific time.
Some more than others.
No, but I mean that like
I think
I
yours more
remember
than mine.
I remember like people that are saying remember back in school, like you can only hold 7 pieces of information at any one time in your brain. That's the explanation of why phone numbers are like 7 numbers. But it's actually much smaller. Learning how to learn has actually told me that it's actually only 4. So it's really like the amount of focus you have, the amount of curiosity you have about something. And it's not always, books are not always the only thing that you can use for learning. So before I get into the books, it's like I want to honor that first of all, there's different kinds of intelligence, right? I could never say a guy like Manny Pacquiao is dumb. He's nice. On a
Sweet
physical
science.
level,
Brilliant.
he's a freaking genius.
In boxing.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Physical intelligence. There's emotional intelligence, right? There are people who are just so aware of themselves and others.
Yeah.
Just pick it up quickly, and so I think there's different kinds of intelligence, and you feed them
Agreed.
differently. So some people are more in tune about being connected to other people or the world or spirituality and it's amazing how the talents are being the way that we define talents are like so much broader than we. Oh, it's just you're smart. Like
It's such a broad word.
yeah. And then you get a lot of entrepreneurs who are like by definition are literally flunked out. Like they're dropouts.
Yeah, most CEOs are C students, right?
Yeah, most of the founders, at least.
Founders,
I think, like the Steve Jobs and the Wozniaks and by that definition, they're like dumb. but it's not. I mean, they have a certain edge, creativity. Even like they're saying, like resilience is its own kind of intelligence. Like the amount of persistence, even in spite of like utter failure. So I think that just we have to first of all define it. It's much more broadly, especially when they got into EO and the current kind of life experiences we've met from people we've met. They're like people who will say, I don't like math, I don't like reading, I don't like. But if you examine their life, there's just so much curiosity, and people like you sell yourself short a little bit on that, but. I know you've gotten into boxing. You've gotten into a lot of.
I just think I absorb knowledge differently.
Yeah.
Like, and I admire people like you who can read so many books. My question too is about like, because it's a very interesting time with technology now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 30 years ago, you wouldn't have the answer to any question at like the palm of your hands. We have that now, and it makes me question like in the future. Like, does it matter to memorize all of these things? Now it becomes more the art of how to ask the questions that matter, and then asking and learning practical things you can actually apply that would impact your life. Versus just knowing a bunch of stuff no longer becomes quite valuable.
Yeah, I learned this from my deep dive a few years ago on data science. That the best data scientists, I mean, the way that the data scientist is trained is highly mathematical. It's like calculus. A lot of math. But the funny thing happened is that when they got to like programming the algorithm to ask a specific to be able to answer a specific questions, the data scientists could not figure out the right questions to ask. And you're right. You're right there, right? They knew how to make the algorithm, but they didn't know what questions to ask so that they would get the right information, and like so they had to really like redefine what a data scientist is. So they created, that's where you get things like liberal arts has its place in more relevant than ever now. Independent thinking, critical thinking, and reading. Unfortunately, is like that one skill that's I don't think will be replaced unless we figure out a way to do it like matrix style. You just
to like absorb the information more efficiently, right?
And I think that's the thing with
Neuralink.
reading. Sorry?
Neuralink.
Yeah, Neuralink and things like that. But even then, even if you had a way to, for example, let's take the Matrix example, like you were able to load Kung Fu into your head.
I know Kung Fu.
Yeah. But Morpheus still needed to talk to Neo in that dojo and check him out.
Yeah.
See that weakness is not your technique, right? They had to figure it out.
Yeah.
Meaning, that's the thing with reading is that you take that one extra step. You're not just a passive learner. Like you're watching a YouTube video, like you're learning. But when you're reading, you're using two processes in your brain. You're visually translating the symbols into meaning, and that meaning into visual in your mind. A way to really process that. So there's two steps. That's the difference between like watching a YouTube video and you're only one step.
Yeah.
You don't need to translate it further.
No, you're just sitting there and you're just trying to absorb what you can.
So, but in reading, you have to do at least a minimum of two things. And I think that's why it's an important skill.
Yeah, I agree. And reading, I think also for people that don't have like the focus which is required to read, I think people can read an entire page. I know I'm not the only one. They didn't have no comprehension from it because their mind was somewhere else.
Yes.
So it requires that discipline of actually, or curiosity, whatever it is, focus, to actually comprehend what it is that you're visualizing.
Yeah. So like when my wife and I were doing a deep dive on homeschooling our child, and the book, it's a fantastic book. It's Classically Training Your Child. She's saying that the age of 6 to 10 is the age that you have to starve them of every digital content. 6 to 10, you only teach them one thing. You teach them how to read.
Really?
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'll never get the skill.
Yeah. It's like so pivotal in that development stage that they get to read 6 to 10, whatever it is, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, whatever they're reading nowadays for young kids, Percy Jackson, because it's a skill. It's like boxing. I can't just go to the gym right now and spar with somebody and not make a complete fool of myself.
Yeah, dude, that's a really interesting thought. I never even knew that. Who found that out? The 6 through 10.
That's the way that they train the homeschooling people.
Gosh, that makes so much sense. Otherwise, what's going to happen? It's going to be like it's going to be a skill you never pick up, right?
Yes. So you're going to be...
You don't need to.
You can pick it up later, but it's going to be harder. Because your brain at that time is also growing at a phenomenal rate.
Yeah.
So the size and share. So you want to bring that skill in. And actually, when I look back in my life, that's true, because that was the time I picked up reading. And the books that I was talking about, like Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, I don't think those books are...
Did you love reading right away as soon as you learned how to do it?
But it was like, first of all, my house was filled with books. My parents loved to read. So, and it wasn't like we had like only encyclopedias and all that. But my dad had...
pretty boring.
Yeah, but my dad had an encyclopedia. And at that time, it's like, he was middle class. I wasn't born into the silver spoon. So for him, buying an encyclopedia at that time is a really huge investment.
Wow.
He had that, and I was filled with with books. So I was at that age. I think I got my own interest in reading. So I think I consider myself blessed that I was able to get that.
Definitely, dude.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think that's the value of reading. And as to like the amount of books you read, it doesn't really matter, I think, as long as you read.
Mm-hmm.
And you see this a lot, like all these CEOs have these book lists, like Steve,
they do.
Bill Gates.
Most effective CEOs read, for sure.
Yeah, even Elon Musk. And the funny thing is that when you look at the list of stuff that they read, they're not even about business. They're very few. I mean, maybe they have one or two, but it's mostly about the things they're interested in, the things that they notice is like different and changing in the world, and that's same as me. I've read. Don't get me wrong. I've read my fair share of business books, and but once you've read enough, after a while, you're kind of. It doesn't make you curious anymore much for those things. What you want, because you're doing it yourself, right?
Yeah.
And normally these are written by professors and people who probably are not very well versed. So I'm sort of leery of taking like psychological or coaching or team advice from somebody who's never led one.
Agreed.
Right. So
yeah.
So I'm very careful, and it's not that I'm not. I'm not gonna read them, but it's just that I'm gonna keep a huge grain of salt, right?
Yeah.
So
that's why I like watching interviews of investors who have already proven, their knowledge, proven their work. They have that kind of backing already, success story.
But there's a lot of things that I think that drive my curiosity. Obviously, wine is one of those examples.
Yeah.
But I mean, every time there's something new, there's always something that I like, that I consider. So there's a difference. Like there are things I read on that are like very practical, very, I would say, functional. But there's stuff that I read for pleasure. Mm-hmm. And there's like huge category. And the funny thing is like what I've noticed, and then I'm reading, obviously the practical stuff, like immediately useful, fantastic. So some of those are not even business books at all. So like I think one of the ones that I was talking about to you before was this guy Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote 3 amazing books. Sapiens is probably his most famous one, Homo Deus, and then 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. Not business at all, but it's amazing understanding, because he's a historian, and the third book he had is probably the most controversial and most personal for him. Also the one that I probably most disagree with. But I mean, I love it when a book challenges you, right? Yeah, and I think as a person you grow, and I think the business grows to the pace of the entrepreneur.
I like that.
So you're kind of shooting yourself if you're not growing, right?
Okay, so we're talking now about books specifically, which is an important outlet for you to gain your knowledge. You talked about how you get lots of value from obviously practical books like the ones that you mentioned, gives you a different perspective. Now, what about the other side of it? Because a lot of the books you read can be fantasy, fiction.
Yeah.
Do you derive value out of those books as well?
For sure. I mean, I'm part of a generation that grew up with it unashamedly, and I think we kind of don't talk much about it because our parents were kind of the ones telling us you shouldn't read those kinds of books like Lord of the Rings and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh, our parents would like that. That's
Well, yeah, I
C.S.
guess.
Lewis.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis. But I mean, that's not based in the real world. But it's fantastic when you see a guy like Elon Musk referencing that there's one set of books you should read, and that's like Isaac Asimov's robotics series and Foundation, which incidentally I've been rereading it because they're coming out with a TV show from Apple.
Really?
So it's amazing going through that, and you have an entrepreneur who's like openly talking about science fiction in that regard, because it's probably influenced him in such a positive way, and in many ways, that's what you want science fiction to become. It's like it's a mirror of our current situation, and of course, what would we do if we were in that situation? So, case in point, like for him, like the Isaac Asimov wrote in the 40s, 50s. This guy is amazing because he basically laid down the 3 laws of robotics, which is, I would say that it's so brilliant that it probably influenced a lot of the roboticists out there, the people who are like programming AI, algorithms.
He was right.
I think he's right. But the funny thing in the way Isaac Asimov wrote his stuff is that he wrote the 3 laws and proceeded to find ways for all the loopholes, all the possibly bad things that would happen.
Okay, like what?
So he never thought that the 3 laws were immutable. They were going to be challenged. Humans going to find their way around it, and so he's coming up with like stories that break the rules. So it's why I love the way it was approached, because it's a problem-solving thing and it's a critical thinking, and it's so prescient, I think, nowadays, especially in the time of algorithms and AI, and we're so fascinated by that relationship of like the creator and the created, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's something there for entrepreneurs to take away from. So I would definitely recommend that. And I remember also another set of books, also legendary, and I think you recently read that.
Which one?
Dune.
Yeah, making a movie now.
Yeah, same thing. I'm also rereading it for the same reason. Like, Dune is amazing. First of all, these are like intergenerational.
Yeah, this was a long time
training
ago,
your
right?
children, like, and finding your purpose, finding your talents. I mean, these are all things that entrepreneurs will resonate with, and it's in a package in a form that's so brilliant and world building wise. Like, I don't see why it wouldn't be recommended as a business book. Like certainly training your child.
Wow, so you go that far, that a science fiction book, you can learn something from the story that you can apply
For
to
sure.
your life.
Oh yeah. One of my favorite series, I told you about that, is Wheel of Time. Also, they're making a series of
You
that.
told me that that's like an epic
It's a
series.
14
How many
book,
pages?
14.
Total?
Yeah, I didn't understand how long it was until you saw the audiobook hour count.
What
And
is
in
it?
each book is something like 100 hours long.
100+ hours.
So you're talking about the 14,000 hour audiobook series.
And you read it more than once, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
But that was an example of. I certainly learned a lot. I wasn't an entrepreneur when I read it. I was a kid. I was a college student. But in terms of problem solving, court politics, they have this thing in that series called the game of houses. It's like these houses are competing for prestige, and the way that they would relate to each other is like informed by one gesture, by one word. Is like you're delivering an insult or a compliment or a slight. Like,
Yeah.
and nobody who's watching it would understand it unless you knew how to play the game, and you would understand that this guy just delivered me the worst insult possible.
Mm-hmm.
I love that there's just so many subtleties about the human nature and how we interact, how power is structured. And this is an interesting world. Wheel of Time is like perfect for this time because Wheel of Time is set in a world where the women are ruling. So basically all the male sorcerers went nuts. So the female sorcerers had to take them down. And it's like a world that's matriarchal. And it's interesting because how it's going to come out. I don't know how they would present it in the new series, but that was amazing because normally you would read series that are very patriarchal, right? It's like ahead of its time. And in many ways, Dune, Foundation, Asimov, all these guys were like ahead of their time. Dune was talking about environmentalism in the 60s.
Yeah, that's right.
It's amazing. So you can't say that there's no value here. I mean, there's immense value, and obviously there's a lot of crap
Yeah.
out there. But I mean, that's why you ask around. Like I don't really like try to find out on my own just like the books that I should read. I ask people around. I love the EO Book Club. Shout out
to Jay.
To Jay,
My forum.
and Barry. So I mean, I love asking them like, what should I read? And then okay, these are the business books. So what's the fun stuff you have? Like, what's their fun list? Like,
Traction by Gino Wickman for EOS. Shout out.
So I think that's the fun part. I don't necessarily. I make sure like I really vet what I read first of all, like because I know I don't have enough time. I mean, like you can't read everything that you want.
Yeah.
But, you had to really choose. So.
By the way, speaking of that, when you read the book, do you always read it, or are audiobook? Are you able to absorb just as much from audiobooks? For example, you're in traffic, you put.
Perfect. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what I miss during this time because I'm not traveling. I'm not stuck in traffic as much.
Yeah.
So obviously I've been reading it more like directly, and I've honestly transitioned away from physical books more into digital. So
Really?
More, very Kindle.
Audiobooks.
Yeah.
So you can absorb just as much from audiobook if you're paying attention.
Yeah, audiobooks and also Kindle.
Ah, yeah. I have a Kindle. It's amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. You have to get the one that doesn't hurt your eyes.
Yeah.
Forgot the name, Paperwhite.
How about like Goodreads? Do you use that to get recommendations?
Yeah, that's where I track my books, but. So that's
like the Vivino of books, basically.
Much better than Vivino. Vivino is.
you don't believe in Vivino?
So for those who don't know, Vivino is like this wine review.
Yeah, you take a picture of a bottle of wine and then it tells you what other people have rated it, and you get a Vivino score. I had my friends all give Vivino 5 stars, by the way. That's why their rating's very high.
Yeah. So I mean, no, but Goodreads is a great place. It's a community. I figure out a lot of stuff I want to read from that. And actually, the list that I have right now for like the fun, but hopefully educational books have been quite interesting. So obviously, we've talked about the classics, and there's a huge list of that. But recently, the ones that I've really interested is actually the ones that I would consider to be like very cross cultural. I read a book recently called. Oh my God, I just forgot it. But anyway,
fiction, nonfiction.
It's fiction.
Okay.
So, but a number of books are like Poppy War, Rage of Dragons. So Poppy War is interesting because it's imagine like the Chinese and Japanese war with magic. So
that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
That's something I would read.
Yeah, and then,
or a movie I would watch.
Yeah, Rage of Dragons is Africa with dragons. So, so they came up with this like cross-cultural City of Brass, Mexican Gothic. Like they're creating more stories outside of the traditional, more like Middle East, medieval European setting, like the Lord of the Rings type of fantasy.
Yeah.
So I think it's great that there's more stories and more lessons. It's like traveling at the same time as figuring out new cultures. And many of these books, like they came up with their own language. So
many books have done that. Many great sci-fi has done that, right?
So I think that's the value of that the imagination it creates, and certainly it's still about the human experience, right? It's still very much about it because it's about you overcoming the odds or not. So there's some, I think there's good value for the ones that are well written. So for sure, and that's actually the bulk of my readings is mostly on that. But I still have that functional, more practical, more things that I'm curious about that are more related to probably self-development. And
okay,
all that.
so to get an idea of how much, you had a goal of 50 books. You exceeded that by how many? You read 60 books. Let's just say 60 books in a year. How many of those books would you say were nonfiction? How many were fiction?
Probably 40%.
40% skewing which way?
Nonfiction. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
So it's still healthy.
It's a healthy mix, I think.
Depends on the year. Sometimes I read, probably the average is about 50 to 60 every year. This year I actually placed the target lower.
Why
because
is
Well, I had to because I ended up rereading a lot of the stuff I've read before, so it's not going to count, right? So, but yeah, so, but it's always about what's functional for me. So for that list, it's more functional. I typically look at more historical or more futuristic, right? Like Peter Diamandis. We love Peter Diamandis.
Abundance,
bold, futurist, faster than you think. Amazing books. Condenses everything that I think is coming down the pipeline. I actually like to read the yearly summaries of Harvard Business Review 2020, 2021. So so it's like a good collection of what they think are going to be important ideas. So those are like my situationers, like what's going to happen, and a few books like from great thinkers. Normally the Gladwell, Harari. I also like some more psychological recently, like Jordan Peterson.
Love him.
I think those are interesting perspectives on like ourselves. Like it's not much on business necessarily. Yeah. So
doesn't even have to be political, because I know how people love to politicize Jordan Peterson, but it's great information.
Well, he's a kick-ass psych professor.
Yeah,
right? He's
incredible.
A practitioner. And he's a scientist. That's the thing, right?
I think he's quite reasonable.
Yeah. It's just that he's basing it off things that are from psychology. I mean, he's not like saying, "Oh, this is what I think."
No, not at all.
He's normally citing somebody, research or published studies. So, I think it's a very useful take. At the very least, it's another thing that's bothering me about learning, right? More and more, we're being programmed to like only entertain specific political ideas, or But I think the idea for learning is that your ability to hold onto that idea, examine it, and make a decision. Like in the same way that you're taking a look at this wine, like. One time you say, "Oh, this is too acidic," or I don't like the secondary flavors. It's too much green leaves. Mm-hmm. That's okay, because now that you at least tasted it, you figured out you didn't like it, and you know why. You didn't just say, "No,
I don't like
that. That's not expensive enough for me."
That's a good analogy.
That's
not expensive enough.
That's not expensive enough for me.
Which I think a lot of people say, by the way, in the wine industry. It's a very pretentious industry.
Yeah. So or I don't drink New World. I only drink Old World. Like, okay, you're missing a lot.
Yeah, definitely missing.
And the same thing with like entertaining even controversial ideas. So there's a number of books I've read that I totally don't agree with.
Oh, so you go that far?
Yeah. I think it's good to have different ideas percolating in your head, and that's the thing I like about science fiction and fantasies. Normally, there's one guy he's the bad guy. Like, then the best books are like the people who will make you agree with him, like sympathize him, right? So, or understand that life isn't black or white. It's gray, and sometimes bad people do good things. Sometimes good people do bad things, and it's just life. So
I think Game of Thrones was the first major series to really turn that whole protagonist-antagonist thing upside down, where you just.
That's probably the most popular one.
Most popular one, mainstream.
Yeah, most mainstream.
They were able to make that idea mainstream.
Yeah.
That idea of tragedy, I think, was missing from pop culture.
But yeah, I mean, for the tragic hero, you got Shakespeare there, man. I mean,
of course.
So many already. He's got locked down. Like, I mean, he just wrote his books like 500 years too early, I think. I mean, he would be big nowadays.
Oh, he would be the biggest.
In fairness, he's still big.
He's still the biggest, I think, of all time. Maybe.
But I mean, in terms of like sympathetic villains and anti-heroes, I think he's got a lot of that down. And even that, I get to that point, I even read some of these more obscure stuff. Like last year, I read a little bit of Seneca, which is from the Roman times, so a little bit on Stoicism. So I think EO recently had an event with Ryan Holiday. He talked about the obstacle is the way. So a very Stoic inspired material. It's beautiful. It's great. I love that they've breathed new life into Stoicism. So then sometimes you get into some more weird stuff, or even like I also read a few comic books myself. Watchmen, a few of the classics like
I loved Watchmen. I
Watchmen.
loved the movie. I never read any of the graphic.
The graphic novel is not very long, so I recommend you pick it up. It's amazing.
I loved it. I
Yeah.
absolutely loved it.
I don't think they did a bad job of the movie, but the comic book was more complex. The ending was more complex
Okay.
because it did the better job of explaining the moral quandary. Because I think most people who don't know what Watchmen is, like it's a series of bad things happening. Turns out it was orchestrated by one of the
entire
former
time.
heroes.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
but he was doing it for in his mind the right reasons.
He
Right?
was.
It's a perfect discussion for businessmen, entrepreneurs. I think it's amazing that most of us like go through that, like that it's the right thing, but this guy's gonna lose his job if you do it, right? So
I love that idea of tying it back to how it could be practical knowledge
Yeah.
for an entrepreneur. I actually agree with you.
yeah, and most times we don't really live that dramatic lives. Like thankfully, you don't have to fire people every day, right? But you get a chance to kind of live that moral the difficulty of handling that moral situation. Whenever I read books like that. So I think Watchmen is a great one. I highly suggest you pick that up.
Yeah.
And so a few, like the new one, the another one that's coming up I also reviewed was Sandman, which is Neil Gaiman's.
Okay.
So I'm kind of reviewing a little bit. And it's kind of like my pandemic comfort food, like going back to the classics that you love. So that's why my book target this year is kind of shot, but it's okay. I mean,
Because you're rereading some classics.
yeah, for me, at least from my definition to be classics.
By the way, Van, I'm going to link maybe the top 10 fiction and non-fictional books in the description here because people have time, people want to read, but they don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So I'm going to link those. So leave us. I'll talk with you after this. And
But
get a list from
but
you.
that is exactly my advice. Ask people who read a lot to recommend to you.
Exactly.
And if he's not the complete snob, he will give you the Merlot equivalent of a book.
And I love Merlot.
Yeah, 'cause everybody loves Merlot.
Yeah,
that's
who
why.
doesn't?
That's why they
It's soft.
exactly. So that's the kind of like you want to find that book that will make you click and make you love reading.
Yeah.
So
Dude, at one point I read Ready Player One in like 2 days.
Yeah.
And then I read Ready Player Two in 2
No,
days,
that-
but I didn't really love it that much. Like I didn't love like the middle of it. The end.
I
was
didn't love the
fine.
whole of it. I mean, that was
The
so.
beginning was getting excited. It made
Yeah.
sense that that's how the technology would progress to. But by the end of it, it was just like, why am I still reading this about like these prince fights? Like I don't know
Yeah.
where this is going. It was like so linear,
Yeah.
Like I would like there to be more of a time horizon, but like I was trying to like cram in everything that happened within like 20 hours or something. It
Yeah.
just didn't feel like an adventure anymore.
And I think why Ready Player One is so special to us is like, of course, it's nostalgia, right? That's
Yeah.
one factor, but it also seemed like he captured the excitement of being in a different world in the I don't know what they call it, the Oasis, right?
Yeah,
So it was
the
the
Oasis.
Oasis, and this is actually he's not the first to explore that. One of my favorite ones that I recommend the book is called Snow Crash. Snow Crash, Neil Stephenson. He's a complete legend in the sci-fi genre. But he talked about that, like being in that metaverse. And now Facebook just announced, literally it's called Metaverse.
Is it glasses with Ray-Ban?
I mean, that's your primary tool, right?
Yeah.
Of being there.
That's the first step. It's
yeah.
augmented reality.
And you
but
bought
only
one of those,
15-second
right?
Videos.
A year or so.
To,
yeah.
Oh, you mean an Oculus?
Yeah, that's what it's your interface, yeah.
Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg Facebook bought Oculus Rift for like
Yeah,
$2 billion.
exactly.
But the tech isn't quite there now. Now they're focusing more on augmented
Yeah.
reality first, I think.
Yeah, you also bought one of those, right?
Yeah, an Oculus Rift,
Yeah.
but there's no one on it.
Exactly.
And it was a fad. It was interesting. It was so cool, but you couldn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
And so I just sold it and got rid of it within 1 month.
Yeah.
But there's no question, if you guys haven't tried that is the future.
Yeah.
Because you'll be able to replicate. This is the infancy stages of that
Yes,
technology.
super.
I can't imagine how much better it's going to
Yeah.
get. But actually, that's a good transition now
Yeah.
because Ven, you're also a futurist. I think that's fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
You're very fascinated with the future. You've read lots of books about the future. Like, do you foresee a future that's similar to this Ready Player One, or what's your thoughts kind of on like augmented reality, virtual reality, What kind of life will our kids be living when they're our age?
Well, I think that's the answer to that is already here. It's already here. We've been playing MMOs for 14, 15 years now. We've been playing online games. We were here in the pandemic. We've been doing online meetings. We have our own avatars. We have our own. It's just we're just a few steps away. It's more like people just need a bit more incentive into using that platform. So like I haven't really gotten into like traveling virtually. I haven't gotten the feel of it. I tried doing a few of those like virtual walks, which was fun. But I mean, I'm sure it would be much cooler if I was wearing an Oculus headset, and obviously if the tour guide was also using one. So we're not yet in terms of immersion, but first of all, I want to say I'm not really a futurist, but I love thinking about it.
Yes,
I love it.
Me too.
And,
I love pondering on it.
Yeah, and certainly if there's a lot. This is like the cross section of my love for science fiction and practical business, right? So you're trying to see a lot of these ideas that are going to come out and figure out how that's going to affect your business. And for me, like where we're headed. Probably, I think they're saying it's like the great migrations of I think the Amandis talked about that. The virtual migration one is something people don't talk about. People always think, we're going to go to Mars.
Yeah.
People are, Elon Musk is going to take us there. Right?
That's nothing compared to what you can do possibly
in just the metaverse, right?
Yeah, in the metaverse.
So that's what one of the theories of these scientists are saying. Like, the whole reason we don't see aliens moving around because it's a hell of a lot more fun running around in your own MMO. So if there's like an alien MMO out there, game, like
it's at the Fermi paradox, right?
Part of it, but they're kind of saying that. That's why we don't see them because they're
I agree with that completely. That's for sure what other civilizations achieve, because I'm sure they can create. Obviously, base reality is boring, and you're able to create a reality that feels more real.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not in this universe, like you said. So how do you feel about that? Do you think that humans will ever innovate to the point where they're able to transfer their consciousness and kind of outlive the physical laws of space-time? I think that's something that happens.
I love that because.
And does it happen in our lifetime?
That's what they're saying. They just don't be stupid and die early, right?
Peter Diamandis thinks it's going to happen in our lifetime, right?
It's I would say no.
We don't make it?
No,
We're one generation short of making it?
No,
it's so sad.
No, I don't think it's going to be that soon. I think it's coming, but it's like we have a whole little host of problems.
Okay, how long do you think we live to?
For us, minimum 2060, 2050, hopefully, but probably plus 10 years. Hopefully.
I was hoping that I would live at least to 100. I thought that was what... Yeah, I guess.
At the end of the century, right?
Yeah.
It would be cool, right?
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's we just have a lot of problems right now that like we're heading in a different direction than I think what a lot of our science fiction people would want us to take.
Depends on what science fiction person, because I'm pretty sure Back to the Future got it wrong, because I haven't seen a floating skateboard anywhere.
Well, you're
not like in the movie.
Not like in the movies, but there's one.
Everywhere.
But
what did they get right? I think they were pretty far off, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're both like more advanced in ways, but we're also behind in ways in terms of we're talking about the science fiction timeline. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, right? That there's an interesting study made by Gartner. It's a group, and they have an amazing tool called the Gartner Hype Cycle. And if you're interested in the future at all, you better check it out. Because
what's it called again? We'll put a link.
The Gartner Hype Cycle.
Okay.
So what it does is that it really tracks like the amount of hype a specific technology has versus its real world uses.
Like VR, like the Oculus Rift?
Yeah. So yeah, they're saying like, okay, yeah, they launched the VR headsets, but how many companies are actually developing games or functions for it? Like very few, right? So the hype cycle would track it, like, oh, it's actually gonna come. And the funny thing is that it's gonna die down. They're predicting everything will kind of die in hype. Then it's slowly come back again, but it's going to be more deceptive. And I think Diamandis talks about it.
Is that the trend to any technology? Not necessarily.
That's what he's saying.
I don't think internet came here and was like super popular, then like it lost hype, then became super popular.
But I mean, talking about the internet, it was developed in like 70s, 80s, but we only got Netscape in the 90s.
Yeah, but it wasn't hype, was it? Was internet ever hype? I'm sure it was
Well,
pretty much just exponential
we
growth.
didn't have the amount of information sharing in the 80s. Like now, you'll hear about
so
it.
you're going back to the early days of the internet.
So, like for example,
that's
like the combustion engine, nobody cared about it until they were buying their first Ford, right? So that's what they're saying. That there has been like hype people that you should invest in. You got these guys in suits saying you should invest in this newfangled thing from Ford. And then it takes 10 years for the first model to come out, right? And then that's like you're tracking that difference of the idea to reality, hype to reality, essentially. And I think it's a great tool, and to look at like talking about blockchain and all that, talking about a lot of these other things that are coming, and how much hype is versus reality. I think it's a great study, and kind of sobers me up a little bit. It's like it's the wet blanket of all the excitement of a specific technology, right?
Yeah.
So the CRISPR-Cas9. We in the book club we just talked about
that's a big
Jennifer
deal.
Doudna, like a big deal, right?
Yeah, it's a big deal.
The ability to do genetic cutting and splicing, huge hype. Like you're gonna be able to have designer babies.
Yeah.
Versus the reality, no, it's gonna be
Who's
very,
actually-
it's
who's
gonna be
actually
very
using
hard.
it?
You're not gonna be able to like design it. You're gonna have like a few things you can cut out, but like the Chinese scientists who like took away something about to prevent the kid from ever contracting AIDS.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, like huge gap in the hype. So I think all of these technologies are. I take a more realistic view of like is it gonna come or not. So in our company, we actually take time to really think through a specific topic, and really figure out a way to deep dive on it, because I guess your company is like following the mindset of the entrepreneur, and my mind is like on this like.
The future.
3 years ago, like we did data science, so that's algorithms, AI, etc. So we did a deep dive on that. I actually created a whole data team around that, creating our own metrics, scorecards, and then automated. So fast forward 2 years, we actually launched a program that would automatically forecast our sales and project it to the end of the year.
Using artificial intelligence?
It's a fancy way. The more accurate term would be like algorithms. Like it's the
Using algorithms.
non-romantic way of talking about it.
Just as romantic to me. Just equally complex.
Yeah, so now you have an algorithm that's tracking your profitability until the next year based on the numbers you have. So obviously the more information you have on that, like a data set, that you would be able to have more accurate shot.
Reminds me of like Minority Report,
Yeah. I mean, even if we go back to Asimov, the whole foundation story, I don't know if you haven't read it yet, but
is it the idea that everything is predictable with information?
Yeah, so he invented this thing called psychohistory,
Okay.
where he looked at the data of the Galactic Empire at that time, the Galactic Empire, and created, and he foresaw the fall of the empire. So he created a foundation that would be able to like save humanity and be able to preserve it. So that's what the foundation is all about. He was basically able to create an algorithm to predict what's going to happen. And in the following books after the first one, he's actually encountering the problems that he predicted. But same as he was talking about 3 laws of robotics, he then spends the rest of his time of the books like figuring out how wrong his main character was, which is funny. He was just like, no, he actually got this wrong. But I mean, it's funny but it's all like data science. It's all algorithms.
I know that. I just don't like the idea of thinking that like with enough information, everything is predictable,
But that's the thing. The book actually talks about the foundation. Spoiler, he's wrong.
He was wrong in the end.
He was wrong because we're humans. We're like, there's
I
always an
think
element.
that there's some kind of free will aspect.
Yeah, so that's why. But he was reasonably accurate, right? He's more than enough. He's a better Nostradamus.
Okay, so we're gonna go down the rabbit hole a little bit.
Okay.
The two major forms of physics is really classical physics and the quantum realm, the really small things versus the really big things. And in a lot of ways, the really big things are quite predictable, like relativity. And in the really small things, they don't seem to follow the same laws that you would expect matter to abide by
Right.
those laws. And
Yeah.
you know that the really big things are made up of the really small things.
Yes.
So in the really, really small things, I'm talking quantum physics now,
Yeah.
it's like every single thing that's possible can happen until it's observed, right? Like Schrodinger's cat
Yeah.
is neither alive nor dead.
Yes.
So that begs me to ask the question of like, it makes me ponder our own existence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like who's observing us, and are there an infinite different versions of myself? Is everything possible that happens? I'm just following one particular path. What do you think about that? About the nature of your existence?
I think the ability of humans to ponder on several levels, at least just even one level, right? Like the fact that we can recall, or the fact that we can predict the future on some level, like maybe, okay, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow. I think just is what makes us special, and that's why I'm honestly quite pessimistic in the possibility of having other alien life similar to us. There can be like alien life, but they're not like us in the sense that we process information like this. Like you can imagine you're a different Chris right now. The one on the beach, one that's married, one that's
one that put this here, and the one that chose not to.
Yes. So the infinite possibilities. But in the end, for me, I'm like there's this dreamer part of me, but there's also that like practical part of me. Like it's all now. In fact, there's some people who are saying like the past never happened. It's just now, and now is all that matters. Like it's kind of sad, but I don't know if I believe that.
What do you mean the past didn't happen? The past did happen.
Yeah, but it's like we're moving, and you can't go back. Literally, I don't know if you can go back, but so I'm very much a guy who's in the now, even though I'm very fascinated by the future, and I think a lot about the past too. But
I think you can go back.
I can. Well, that's a different conversation, right? But
no, the law of physics states that you can go back if you can travel faster.
But do we have enough energy to actually do it? I don't know. But
I don't know if matter can go back, but for me, I'm comforted by the fact that like our experience of nowness.
Specific quantum particles do that, like the muons, right? You see them. They're moving differently. Like they're moving.
Well, quantum entanglement, right? Spooky
Yeah.
action from a distance. Yeah. They're able to somehow communicate past the universe, but they could just be connected.
But for me, like a part of the practical part of me is like, what does that have to do with me right now? I think it's more like the way you use it to think of the like. Do I always have to follow the path I'm on, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I'm more practical in that part. Even though it's really fun to explore that. Like in science fiction, you can do that. You can do a lot of multiverse crap. Like Marvel is moving into the multiverse. Spoiler for those who haven't watched. I mean, you have something as pop culture as that, exploring it into the Spider-Verse by Spider-Man. I mean, it's amazing that you have a medium that will explore it. But in the end, like it's about Chris who's right now. It matters, right? Not the Chris who had the other wine glass here.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of practical in that regard. So I'm both a dreamer and a bit of a realist.
I guess I'd see it differently. Like I'm a dreamer in the sense that I believe that it gets recorded. Everything that you do will get recorded. And this idea of me passing through time, or this conversation we're having now in terms of physics, is kind of like an illusion. Like it just depends on who's observing it. I happen to be observing it from this perspective. But me being born could still be happening now to someone else. Because we know that time can be shaped by speed, by density, by gravity.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm kind of like encouraged by that, but also kind of scared by it too.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder why. I think the major question is, why does time only move in one direction? Or at least it seems to.
It seems to, yeah.
They say entropy, right? But still, like, it's just really, really crazy. It makes me feel that like I want to make sure. It's like your life, your whole life is like you're carving out your existence in space-time. You're leaving this sculpture behind.
Yeah.
And it will outlive me after I die.
Yeah.
That's my incentive to make sure I try to do and live like a good life, because it will get left behind.
That's true. I think that's the thing that that I like about when you say talk about thirst for learning and curiosity. It's like even things like this, which is there's no rules talking about what we're talking about right now.
Not.
But
Schrodinger's cat's neither alive nor dead.
Yeah, and one can say, okay, if you're being a wet blanket, like, oh, these are all theories.
Yeah.
So like the many worlds theory and all that, it's like it's just fun to be curious about it. Like, and I think we've spent a lot of time over wine talking about things like this, and I think it's its own kind of thirst for learning, right? And then, of course, you're also bringing it back to like the kind of life you want to live because of what you've been thinking about.
Yeah.
I think in that regard, I agree. But I mean, I think I'm very comfortable with saying I don't know if it's real. But it would be cool if it was, right? One of the things we recently talked about is that we don't even need to be interested in the multiverse yet, because the idea of living in this current timeline and the seeming infinity that we are being faced with is so interesting. And what does infinity mean? For me, like the practical meaning of infinity is that this same conversation is happening in the future, because if we have enough like infinite time, like this is going to happen again.
It's bound to happen again, yeah.
Exact same version of you. Maybe I'm sitting there and you're sitting here, and that happens. That's what infinity is. Like we have enough time for that to happen again.
Like we can comprehend the infinity.
Right. I mean, you don't even need to jump timelines like multiverse. You don't even need to, just in this specific one. Imagine that you are married to Pia Wurtzbach in a different timeline. Maybe it's not too late, dude. But
words of encouragement.
So there is that world out there. That's what infinity is, literally. And
everything that's possible that could happen.
We don't even need to move multiple worlds, like, right? I mean, that alone is just if infinity is real, right? So like we reach the heat death of the universe, and the new one starts, and then that specific universe is like one smallest permutation is that you are married to this person or whatever.
Pia.
Yeah, Pia.
Specific.
Right. Yeah, specifically. So exactly. So that's what infinity is. That happens. So that's like, wow. Okay. So I think that's a mind blowing thought. That's
the thing about it, and that's a great, like you said, it's a great theme about this whole podcast, because we're talking about thirst and knowledge. Like, is it worth pondering things that you can't prove or know? And from my conversation with you, even fictional books, you relate to how you can bring those practices to being an entrepreneur. It's like, yes, absolutely. Yeah. That curiosity is extremely important for the human mind to stay sharp.
Yeah.
And the idea also, the humility of saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's very hard for people to do. I don't know. So the thirst for knowledge isn't like specific to thirst for practical knowledge.
No.
It's like more just like the idea of thirst for understanding almost.
Yeah.
Maybe it might be like a better...
I think it's just wanting more. And one of the books you've heard about it, called Flow, by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he talks about, he's very practical. He's saying that this is all there is. And for you to achieve a state of flow in your work, the amount of like just being in the moment in such an intense moment in your work life or even thought life, being in that flow is like the peak human experience.
Okay.
He's saying that nothing else matters. We're all gonna die. It doesn't matter. He's a very his philosophy is like
all that matters is right now.
Yes.
Like this moment that we're sharing right now.
Yes. So that's why flow is so important, because it's the peak human experience. But the rest of his worldview, I mean, that's great, right? I love flow,
like
right?
that.
But the rest of his worldview is like, because that's all there is. We only have work. We only have life. That's it. There's nothing else. Like, no, I don't agree. I mean, that's why we want to talk about infinity. We talk about different worlds, or the importance of living a moral life beyond just flow, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think there's a thirst for that. So it's one of those books that I don't agree with, but I love his book.
I agree with that idea that you should. I believe that's true to an extent, right? The idea that now
it's important.
Is very, very important.
And reaching that flow is very important.
Why is it called flow? What do you mean reaching that flow?
Because it's the state of the mindset, right? That wherein you are just hitting your stride, where to you, your effort of 1 + 1 is not 2. It's like 3 or 4, because you're just in this moment and you're living life at its most optimal. Mm-hmm. Like your brain, your mind, your heart, your focus is all on that one thing, and like you reach it, and it feels great. It feels great. It's like falling in love and that having that one person like feel the same way about you. That's like reaching that moment. Like it's like it's its own kind of emotional climax. It's like, but for him, like on a work level, you reach that on your own, like with yourself. So I think I like the way he talks about it, but I but he's saying that because that's the peak. Like, okay, anything below that is nothing. Like, okay.
I still think there's like planning. I still believe in sacrifice and delayed gratification.
Yeah,
that's still important too.
But for him, just I guess it's following a little bit of like the old Descartes. You know, I think therefore I am. But like anything outside of me may or may not be real. So the only thing I can prove is that I think. So therefore, I may be real now. But you may be you're just a construct of my imagination. I'm talking to.
Maybe you are.
Maybe.
You're talking to an NPC. I think that we've gotten highly theoretical so far in our conversation, which is what I love doing.
Yeah.
And I think the major takeaway is that there is a huge value, I think, in pondering your existence. I think that people don't do it enough, and I think that we just spent a long time doing it. And it is worth discussing, even if you don't know the answer, right?
Yeah,
it's
for
still
sure.
worth doing. But we've kind of diverted kind of far away from maybe more practical knowledge, which is what might be more useful for people watching. Not that conversation wasn't. So I want to talk about SCPA a bit, bring it back to your company. And in particular, there was something that you did. You partnered with AIM.
Yeah.
And you granted these students basically was it a business plan competition?
Yeah. No. It's actually these are actually real businesses already.
Real businesses.
Real businesses.
These
Yeah.
fresh graduates.
No, they're part of the incubator.
Okay.
And there's a Dado Banato incubator who partnered with AIM, and we were looking for something representative of our values and to do in the 25th anniversary, which is next month. So we were looking to maybe look at businesses, and particularly ones that encourage employment, because businesses as part of nation building is like super underrated, and it's not even the big corporations who are the biggest employers. It's like collectively, it's the SMEs.
Yeah, it's the small businesses.
Yeah. So we were looking for small businesses that we could mentor. So it's not just about giving the grant. So obviously, like everybody,
no equity. This is just purely giving a grant.
It's purely a grant, just no equity. So obviously, there's like a small seed money we gave, and then but the real thing that we wanted to do was talk to these businesses and be able to mentor. We just finished the 6th session last Saturday, so there's going to be a wrap-up session. So we actually chose three of the businesses within the incubator, and amazing stories, amazing businesses, and we were talking about it in a very systematic way, like marketing, finance, and then all in like being able to give them an idea of how important having a very strong mindset for your employees is huge for growing it. Because a lot of these businesses are actually influenced by the VC culture, right? It's like you always have to 10x.
Yep.
You
have to be a unicorn, otherwise I'm not interested in you.
Yeah.
What's wrong with my investment?
And most of businesses are not unicorns. But they're gonna survive. They're gonna grow, and they're gonna have employees. And then we wanted to tell the story of SCPA through that mentorship, and hopefully influence them, to guide them. And certainly, I think it's been very fun. The learning has been both ways. So we were very excited.
How many companies have you funded?
We chose three. Three. And
so
one
like
is
Shark Tank type of like
initially in the selection process was a bit that, but we were not judging their business model. We were judging their potential to be able to employ many people. That was the only thing that we were looking at. Because if it's just sheer like business model alone, well, first of all, these guys are like trained in how to present and really good at it. So it would be impossible to choose, honestly. Because we chose like 9 from 9, then we had to trim it down to only 1. And okay, we made the concession, let's add 2 more because it was so hard to choose.
Yeah.
So we did that, and we did the mentorship. We just finished it, and we learned as much as I think, hopefully, as much as they have. We've been learning how they're doing things and the expectations, and even the new things that they're doing that we're not doing. So I think it's always great to compare. But the initial idea was actually from my sister, and when she was pitching it, because she had been going through my father's notes as part of the 25th anniversary preparation.
Okay.
And then, so she saw the mindset my dad had. And essentially, I think the core values of a business is really based on how the founder does in his personal life, at the same time, how he does his parenting. I think parenting is a huge
Interesting.
has a huge effect. So how we grew up is how my dad and my mom grew SCPA and how they approached giving responsibilities to employees, developing them, spending time with them. So like what he did for us, he was doing for the employees. So these were the things that were like, so this is a huge thing. If you're a founder, you have to be careful about your own values and really be aware in how you affect the business. So how you probably raise your kids is probably how you're raising your employees, right? So we told the founders of these companies, be aware about that, because if you're gonna be like a very, just pure mind, no heart, it's gonna show up in your business. So that's what we wanted. That was the message, and it was fun. It feels like another fire will start up in us. Like we want to have that same energy as they do, because it's just infectious, man. It's just infectious.
That startup environment is completely contagious. It's amazing.
It's amazing, and I think the startup scene in the Philippines is very young. They're saying that we're like 10 years behind Indonesia.
Absolutely.
Like really?
I think you're yearning for that experience you had when you were like 21 in Davao,
Exactly.
starting up the business.
Exactly.
And now you're able to like see a sense of that with the businesses that you're funding now.
And that's like part of that visual thing. My dad had this mentor, Mr. Ting, and he gave a talk in the 10th anniversary of SCPA, which will always be in my mind. Like,
what did he say?
And he was saying that companies don't really grow in like, there's like a growth spurt and then down.
Yeah.
It's that the only reason you go down is because you are not able to find your next S curve.
Yeah.
So like Apple, right? When Steve Jobs came back, he was like he launched the usual products that Apple had, and then he pushed through with iPhone. Then it went to a different atmosphere. Then the Apple Store, iPad, everything like it. So it was actually a series of S curves. You don't really see it. Like we only see it went up.
Yeah.
Right? But actually it's a series of curves. Like we don't grow in straight lines.
Yeah.
So it was about finding your next S curve, and I think that really informed me the way that Mr. Ting was talking about it. It's like we each have to find our own S curve. So like after the fire that we had, so our factory burnt down in 2012, end of 2012. After that, it was like a new S curve for us.
Yeah.
It's like we got into cloud-based, because our servers burnt down. So I was like horrified.
You were forced.
So now I went as early as 2013. I was in the cloud, and then it's just funny. It's like some of these companies were just talking about the cloud last year. Like, okay, we were already ahead. So.
Well, you just talked earlier about how you're using algorithms and AI to predict sales and profitability. So I'm guessing you're quite far ahead. I'm definitely not even close to that point where I can use those two words about my sales. I'm just using Microsoft Excel. I mean, it's working for me. It's my own AI.
It's the Kimbo algorithm.
I mean, it's not that complicated, I guess.
But I was fascinated with that. So that fire kickstarted a lot for us. It's like our new startup. And since then, we've been kind of intentionally growing the company. So we figured out one thing, that first of all, the company grows to the heights of what the entrepreneur can handle. Mm-hmm. And then...
That's what you said earlier.
Yes. And then, but the entrepreneur is also held back by the kind of people he has, right? I mean, if you are spending a lot of time fighting fires, then you're not gonna have time to grow. Mm-hmm. So the logical stuff for us was that we started creating learning opportunities for our company, for our people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
what's the program called? Do you have is there a name? This is like a school within your company or a training program within your company? What do you call it?
I think we probably have to have a name for it, but we actually create tracks, different learning tracks. So last year we did probably like the general track, which we've done since before. Ever since around 2015, every Monday afternoon, it became like a tradition that we are learning something new. So that's a whole 2-3 hours every Monday. That's every week. Mm-hmm. So the amount of man hours is like immense. But that wasn't very difficult for us to do because we actually did that even before with Bible studies. So we had these Bible studies, which is essentially like a learning and development thing every week as well, every Saturday. So we did a more like practical one every Monday. So it just came from there. So every afternoon, Monday, we would learn about something new. And we developed these systematizers. I created the whole HR group around it. And then, so it got to the point that we were even doing like film critique.
No way.
Yeah. And then, of course, book reading.
Is this every Monday?
Yeah. Well, for the films, we do about 2 films a month. Amazing. So I believe they just did Sunset Boulevard and recently.
So cool. And like, what is why? Like, why does a company like yours do that? And how many? And you're talking thousands of employees, but like, why? What's the motivation behind having your employees learn about Sunset Boulevard?
Because it's about critical thinking. So it's a huge thing that the kind of people I need in the company are people who I want to not be a lemming. So we want people who are thinking. This is actually, again, flowing from what my parents taught us. So at an early age, we were exposed to, the classics, Sound of Music, all that. It's not a problem for us to, so nowadays people say, oh, that's not very cool, that's very old-fashioned. But it's how we grew up. And we were able to learn things from the films. So it started out with my mom saying, it should be mandatory that you guys watch these. These are like classics. And then, of course, Leia and I came in. My sister Leia is a film school graduate.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but she took a while before she joined SCPA to join Bigfoot, was it, in Cebu. So she loved film, and I loved film more as an amateur, but I was approaching, film is like extension of science fiction, fantasy, and everything, and then so we do a few of those, and they I think did the breakdown for Sunset Boulevard and a few other movies. So we did that. We also have books, obviously, so not just business books. So I think Leia did a few books as well, very interesting. A Gentleman in Moscow, a very good book. She also did Flow. We did a few of these books, and so we do a lot of these things that are, I believe, improve critical thinking.
For sure.
So that's the general track. Everybody can participate in that, and I think the pandemic made it easy with Zoom and everything. It's so easy to implement.
It's like you have your own learning.
Literally, I have people who are the faculty, the principals of the track. Yeah. So a few months ago, I think the track that you're talking about is the L track, the leadership track. Uh-huh. So basically, it was a very selfish project for me because I was saying I want to surround myself with managers who kind of already know how I think. So it was.
That's why you're teaching them wine.
Some of them, yeah. Craft beer recently, craft gin. So all of these things I got, so zeroed in. But even wine tasting is a critical thinking exercise. But maybe we're kind of sidetracked. But critical thinking, the leadership track is very, very, I would say, selfish, to be honest, because I wanted to be with people who understood the mindset. So. And if you said that, if I tell you that this is your job, I wanted you to know exactly what it means. And I think this is a very important engagement metric for companies to figure out. Do your people actually know and understand what they are supposed to do? And this is EOS talks about this, right? GWC.
Yep.
They have to get it.
And the accountability chart. Get it, want it, have capacity to do
Exactly. And the get it part is what I consider my responsibility to them. I have to communicate in such a way that they get it.
That they get it, okay?
Yeah, so that's the L track. So it's a very self-serving in many ways because I want them to get it.
Yeah, of course.
Like, this is the way I want you to run things.
But you can't make them want it.
No, that's their part.
And the capacity is kind of up to you.
Yes.
That's your job as manager.
Exactly.
Dude,
So
that's
we
awesome.
did level 1, which is the way we did the structures. There are 3 levels for now, and there probably going to be more. The first level of training was for level 1, and these are people we consider to be first among equals. So these are people who don't have the title.
Okay.
So they're just so good that people respect them, follow them, and by seniority or maturity, they lead. And it's a fantastic place. I mean, this is like, these are the people we need to find and develop.
Mm-hmm.
So these are very high potentials. The one that we did recently started is with level 2. These are the people with the title. So they're handling a team. Doesn't matter if that's a department or a small team or a small satellite or a big branch. As long as you're handling a team, you're doing level 2. And the next one is level 3. We're very excited about that. It's like an MBA light version. So this one is 120 people in the first level.
Second level?
In second level, 60, and about 30 in the level 3.
Okay.
So.
But do they have to go through each level
Yes.
to get there?
Yes.
Ah, okay. And how much time do they spend in each
So
level?
these are just boot camps. So level 1 will persist. So meaning that as long as you're in level 1, we will continue investing in you.
Okay.
So it's a lifelong learning. But
Level 2.
if you get bumped up to level 2, you can still attend the level 1 stuff that's coming along, but we'll also have something more targeted towards you.
This is so cool.
Yeah, and then level 3 would be like case studies and all the crazy stuff. So
Like a mini MBA.
yeah, exactly. Because I don't want them to take time out for 2 years. I'm again very selfish. Like
How do you come up with like the curriculum and like what department is doing this and like how?
HR. So I have
This is HR?
I have a very kick-ass group of people from HR.
Jeez, that's like one of the coolest things I've ever heard.
But that's also like you. But you're gonna want to do it because these are the people who you'll be working with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do they have to have a certain tenure to be able to make it to level 3?
So we have some fresh hires there.
Really?
Yeah. So as long as that's your role.
What happens if you do you graduate? Is there like a whole like?
Where we do a few things. So a few of the courses that are like if we farm it out with a different company like AIM or John Clements and a few things, they give but it's not really it. But I tell them it's never gonna be about the classroom. It's gonna be about the real world. So
Is there a level 4 coming after that?
I think so. I think
wow,
so.
what's
There
that
will
going to be?
We'll figure out first on what we're going to do the level 3. But the interesting thing is like first here is like personal leadership. You're so good in what you do, people just follow you, right? In here that you have the official title and a team follows you. Level 3 is already complex. So you're leading across the organization. So you're handling work groups, not just your department. You're handling work groups. You're negotiating across like from sales, interacting to logistics.
Yeah.
So I think 4th would be like very strategic in nature in my mind. Like it's very C level, probably. So I'm very excited, man, to just launch
it.
it.
Like one of the coolest things I've ever heard. Honestly, that you have that all within your organization. You're able to coordinate with HR. Was that your initiative?
That's definitely my pet project.
Jeez.
And because they were saying, sir, for this to happen, you're gonna spend money.
Are you seeing the return on your investment? Not that that's the only reason why you do things, but are you seeing like when people graduate from that program, they have a better perspective on what they do?
I didn't take the perspective of ROI just yet. I just said I just wanted to launch it because
It's so cool.
Because what I did have in mind is just that I have an awareness of like how much I spend in a specific store and how much display costs and whatever.
Yeah, that's how people
listing
like
fees.
basic minds like me think.
Yeah, I'm saying like I'm spending this much with this store.
Imagine what I could do with that money to help my people.
Yeah, and then I'm looking at
gain a new skill
I'm looking at my learning and development budget, and it's like it's not enough.
yeah.
So it's like I wanted to put my money where what my words are saying. Like, okay, I really have to do this, and frankly it's fun. It's a lot of fun. Even like doing a lot of the things we did before. I don't think we would do this if it was boring.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we didn't want to create a program that was like so dull. I mean, we wanted to do like books, we wanted to do film, we wanted to do plays, we wanted to send them to travel. Travel is a huge thing. Like
We get to travel too?
Oh yeah, once you hit your 5th year, you're eligible for travel every 5 years.
Oh my gosh. Are these like incentive trips for graduating?
They're not even incentives. They're like
to learn about a particular culture?
So my dad actually started that. Like he wanted to make sure because he knew, and you know this, like when you travel, it's like a higher sort of living.
It's the greatest investment you can make. It's the only investment where you don't lose money.
Yeah, so
that's what they say.
And it's so fun. So he started sending people to Hong Kong. Then we went to Beijing. Then we went we had a few people go to Japan, and we did Korea before the pandemic. So we were sending people out because they were just, when they come back, they're not the same people anymore.
Definitely
they're completely.
Not. That's why you need to travel.
Yeah,
that's why it's
so
so hard
that's
right
actually
now.
from my dad. It wasn't from us. Like he even as our child, like he took us, traveling, and I know from a personal experience how different you become.
Definitely.
And the ideas, your ability to understand other cultures, right? So you're not just so monoculture and this is all I know, and this is.
It's just that perspective that changes the way that you think about the world and about people.
So we send people out, and we really spend for it, and we make sure that they really see a lot, and then they give them money. They don't just do shopping. We tell them, don't worry about the shopping. Go for the experience. So
you take care of the experience.
Yeah. So in the early times, we would be the tour guides. We took them around Hong Kong. We took them around various places. And every time our people go out for travel for business, like when they go to Bangkok, they go to whatever, we always tell them, take an extra day to see the city. You don't rush home, because you're already there. We already spent money to send you there.
Cool. So this is after. They're eligible for this after they finish level 1, level 2, level 3.
No, not really. No, this is everybody.
Oh, this is just everybody.
Regulars.
And this isn't like an incentive trip if they hit target.
It's not really an incentive. So there's a different set of stuff for incentives.
So then how, obviously I want to be part of that program if I work for you, where you just sign up and you say, I would like to participate.
Yeah, the travel is like, we were doing it for 5 years, but sometimes we even send people like only 3 or 4 years in the company.
Yeah, that's what you're saying, 5 years.
Yeah, stay
but
with
not
us.
related to the learning program that you have within your company.
And ideally, completely different. And then ideally, we send you out every 5 years. So like there's some people who went to Hong Kong, then they went to Japan. So... And then a few others, And most people actually travel more than that. So especially if it's for your work, right? So they go to China, they go to... we were supposed to... Singapore. We were supposed to send a few people to the U.S. already. I think we already sent some people. I brought one. Yeah, Mario was with me. So I think it's people who will have a highest potential to grow. They're going to be so... useful to you. So I think there's definitely an ulterior motive to it.
There is, but like not really, dude. Like whether there's an ulterior motive or not, I think that the employee that gets to travel is very grateful for having an employer that can offer them that opportunity. Yeah. Because they'll get so much out of it. Yeah. For sure, like you said, and that's why you're willing to do it. Yeah. I think both people can win from that.
True, and it's not that of a big of a stretch for us to spend on it. I mean, because before the pandemic, it was so cheap to travel. Now I don't know afterwards.
It's crazy. Although I did get a promo fare to the U.S.
Like but your promo fare is probably nothing compared to the price it was before the pandemic, right?
Yeah, it's still kind of
expensive. Because before you could go to the U.S. already for like $600 or something.
No, not right now.
No, yeah.
The airlines are struggling.
So I was talking to a few of these people who from my team that you should try. They're single young ladies, young men who was like, save up for Rome. They were asking me, where do I go to travel if I'm going to be traveling? As I'm a single,
Rome?
Where's the cheapest place in Europe?
Like, cheapest place.
And I was saying, for me, Rome would be the best place to go because first of all, it's cheap. It's a round trip, to Rome, and there's so much to see. It's practically a walking air museum, right?
It is.
You don't have to do anything to have. You don't have to like pay anything. You're there.
There's just so many tourist traps in Rome.
Oh yeah. But I told them, like, if you're looking for a place that's cheap, it's not. I mean, Paris is just crazy. It's expensive and it's dirty. And Rome is, like, for me, the best And then there's so many cities nearby.
Especially if you're a student of history.
Yeah,
I think
for
Rome's
sure.
very interesting.
So we get into conversations like that, and then I was telling them, stop trying to go to Korea because you love K-drama. It's like, oh, that's for that same amount of money you can be in Rome. Come on.
Yeah, I think that's the right advice.
So, but of course, if that's where they want to go, I mean, it's great. But
That's incredible, dude. Like that's a program that's not even related to your learning program, which is also incredible. But the fact that you're giving your employees a chance to gain that perspective on seeing the world kind of sucks right now because they can't really travel.
Super.
But like the fact that the owner of your company, such a big company, is doing that for your people, I'm not surprised why they love staying with you.
But it's a good thing because, well, first of all, we're not alone, but I'm sure there are people doing those things. And I think it's just more people should be talking about it.
I tried my best. I had my staff hit their incentive, and then one day before we were like expediting. We were in Spain. I had an Airbnb, and they weren't able to get their visa approved.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, honestly. It's a full job getting them approved.
But you probably have a very good HR. You're able to do that.
We have a good broker, so we try to do it. But yeah,
the process
it happens
early, I think, is what I learned. I started too late.
So most of my employees, I tell them, try to get your own US visa ahead, if it's a US one. So I told them, if you have the visa, it's more likely I'll send you because I don't have to worry about, having you run through the hoops. I think Shenzhen is hard because of the more difficult. But
who knows, dude? Now it's a completely different ball game. I don't even know when you'll be able to do that for your staff. I really want to do that for my staff, but I don't know when I'll be able to send them to get that experience.
But I think even in the Philippines alone, like one of the things I've been geeking out on is Philippine culture, Philippine history, Philippine products like chocolates, gin, and all that. The Philippines has so much to offer travel-wise, culture-wise. I think it's just that normally when we go to vacation, like we only go to Boracay and we go to Palawan, like we don't go to the places that are actually cultural and historically significant. So, too bad. I mean,
I still love those places that you listed. Not Boracay. Sorry.
But it's a funny thing, right? There's supposed to be, like, my wife and I take two kinds of vacation. One is like footloose kind of one, like we travel, we explore.
Yeah.
And then there's like a travel that's like you completely disconnect and just recharge. So I think people need to do that, and they have to have their own disconnect kind of vacations. But there are also supposed to be vacations that challenge you. Mm-hmm. You go places, learn something new, learn a new skill, learn a new language. So
agreed, dude. Okay, so we're running we're an hour and 45 minutes in, actually longer. We're like 2 hours in, and we've had a very good discussion. And I want to end with this last question. Okay, so the theme of this podcast is thirst for learning. And I think that we've talked a lot about learning, and we've talked a lot about knowledge and pondering. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question for you is, what is the difference to you between knowledge and wisdom? Which one is more valuable?
I think knowledge is I would say wisdom is definitely very much. First of all, I'm a Christian, so what wisdom means to me goes beyond like what I believe in its definition, right? So wisdom is, and I think the reason why wisdom trumps knowledge is that knowledge is, in many ways, it's inert, meaning it is what it is, right? It's the reality, and reality and truth has its own importance, but sometimes reality is not. It's not the total truth, not the full thing, right? So it is, in many ways, a lot of modern-day philosophers and certainly a lot of atheists are trying to reduce reality into just a chemical interaction. It's like we're just chemicals living through this, and consciousness is just that, and that's it. A very reductive point of view. I'm not saying all of them think this way. I'm just saying that generally, there is to my opinion, a very bleak view of the world, because that's the truth. We are just mud. We are just
randomly put together.
Yes, we are somehow through evolution. We were put here, and it is what it is.
Which is fair for people to believe.
And it's
that's
true.
What they want to believe.
It's not like they're wrong,
that's
right?
Fair.
I mean, all of that is true, but it doesn't get to the heart of why. Like, what? We're a random joke of the universe. We're a pretty cool joke if that was true. Like, we wouldn't be having these kinds of conversations. I mean, the fish, hopefully they're having conversations like this, and we don't know. I'm not judging them.
Maybe dolphins.
Maybe dolphins and the squids, right? So,
Yeah, the squids. Maybe octopus too.
But I mean, it's. I mean, for me, wisdom is really getting to the heart of it, and why there's a difference between doing something that's beneficial and doing something that is, I would say, really from the heart, right? So when you do something like in business, I do this, like I train my people because it's beneficial to me. That's like reality. But your reaction is like pointing more towards, that is so cool that you have an employer like that who cares enough, right? And I think what the pandemic has shown us is that the living the reality is beyond just chemical interactions. The inner world of the people matters. Mental health, resilience, all that is tied to the why. It's not tied to the what.
Yeah,
like, so
the randomness of things.
So I think the pandemic is teaching us a lot of these lessons that are overshadowed by just the harshness of the reality, right? There's no joke, it's hard. But when I remember when we had the fire in our business, I mean, the harsh reality is like, oh my, the business is done. It's like done. There's no future, right? And if you're looking at that particular time, literally your machines have burnt down, your raw materials, your jumbo, all the paper is like going to the air. Objectively, you're saying like, oh, that's it. But the harsh lessons of that reality, I mean, if we had not gone through that, we wouldn't have reached the current S-curve, the current reality that we're having right now.
Invested in your cloud.
Yeah, all these things, right, that made us ready for this pandemic. So I think there's a lot of lessons in the pandemic that, yeah, it's hard. I mean, nobody's saying that's not true, but I mean, but we have to take a look at the why and the future, and we still believe. And I think that's where I think wisdom is coming in, that the wisdom that we're learning, that for us to be resilient, we have to look inward as well, like emotional strength and looking out for each other, right? And reaching out to others. And I think don't let the bad situation ruin all the lessons that you could accumulate. So in many ways, like we learn best when we make mistakes, and I've made a lot of them.
I don't think the fire is a mistake. I think that's just...
bad things happen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I think if you're just looking at purely intelligence, some people would conclude that it's all hopeless, right? It's, but it's not. I mean, there's still a lot to live for. And in many ways, we have to rewire ourselves in like, is it really true that everything is as bad as we think it is? Of course, we've lost loved ones already. Each of us have personally lost loved ones, and I'm not saying I'm happy they're gone, but we have to take a look at more than that. And I think that's also a reason why I think in our company we spend time talking about spirituality, and in particular we are Christians. So I always say we're not a Christian business, but we are Christian owners. And we are definitely the most imperfect people you'll meet. So we always say that, because like, oh, this is a Christian business with Christian owners. Oh, they're gonna be perfect. I go, no.
No. That's not how it works.
No. But we always tell them, like, don't look at us. Look at God and the lessons you're learning. If you don't believe in Him, it's okay.
Yeah.
Look at the lesson. Like, so we always talk about that, and I think we'll always continue talking about that. Because there is something beyond intelligence, right?
Agreed.
So
there's wisdom beyond intelligence.
There's wisdom,
and there's
and
even something more beyond that.
Yeah. So I think it's an amazing. I still think it's an amazing time to be alive.
Me too.
Looking at it but
also a scary time.
It's always been scary.
Yeah,
hasn't it?
true.
Hasn't it been always scary, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes we forget. I think the part of the problem has been that we are currently receiving news and information at such a pace that we're not evolved to
We're
handle.
not used to getting all of that. Yeah.
So people have always died, right? People
yeah,
have people.
yeah. Not to mention the incentive for like the news outlets to make the most entertaining news possible.
Yeah.
It might not be the most.
People die of
important
flu all the
news.
time. People die of cancer.
Agreed.
People die. I mean, I'm not saying it's not painful, but
our world becomes smaller because of information
yeah.
technology.
So I think like intelligence gone wrong. I think it's a theme of a lot of these science fiction books, and even we're seeing right now in the way algorithms are like pointed towards our mental state. Is certainly probably where it needs to catch up on wisdom. So, but I think I believe in the human race. I believe that we can do it. We've done well so far.
Yeah.
And I hope we figure it out.
Yeah, me too. I wonder if AI will ever be able to calculate and figure out why, or if that's just something that only humans ponder, you know?
Probably. They'll probably have an answer that's uniquely theirs.
Then you can keep asking why. It's like it's a black hole of asking why.
One of my favorite books, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Have you heard of that, right?
Of course.
And he meets this supercomputer that's been calculating for like millions of years the answer to the life, universe, everything. And the answer is like 42.
Amazing.
And then the funny thing was like the robot who looked at the answer found comfort in it. Like, it's nice, like 42. So it's funny. Like